This podcast is made possible by supporters like you. Mahalo. And by Atlas Insurance Agency, Hawaii's largest professional agency, helping Hawaii navigate insurance solutions since 1929. More at atlasinsurance.com.
Aloha mai kako. Welcome to a new episode of What School You Went? Start every conversation with that question. I'm Ron Mizutani, and today we're talking story with an old friend of mine, historian, an author, a columnist, consultant, educator, so much more. Bob Sigall. Bob, welcome to PBS Hawaii. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you again, Ron.
Oh my gosh, you and I go way back. But before I continue, I got to ask you, like we all asks all our guests, what school you went?
Culver City High School in Los Angeles.
Culver City.
It was a single high school district with 8 feeder elementary schools, and it was, I would bet it's on the level of Punahou in terms of quality of education. I had great teachers, loved school, never ditched, but I would have taken a class in journalism if I knew I'd end up as a journalist.
We're going to dive into that because your background is fascinating, and your education and where you are today and your incredibly long career here in the islands. What brought you to Hawaii?
I met a girl at a party in California who was, her father taught at UH, and she sent me a college catalog. And when I was looking for graduate school, I applied to Hawaii as well as some schools in California and Connecticut and a couple across the country. And UH was the first school to accept me, and something magical just kind of grabbed me. And UH went to the top of my list, and I came here. And it was a little disappointing, actually. The college wasn't it was pretty much like my undergraduate studies. I studied psychology. I have a master's in psychology. And it was very similar to my undergraduate work. So I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work in the community and took a lot of classes to supplement what I was studying at UH by taking classes in the community privately. And that gave me a great education.
I've got to ask, what happened to the girl?
She married another Bob, and she's living in California. And we didn't last very long, but, I came here, and she dragged me to the Diamond Head Theater where she was auditioning for Guys and Dolls. And so I got to hang out with the cast and got immersed into a little bit of that. Beverly Noah was one of the leads back then for Guys and Dolls, and Ed Kenny was the male lead. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's a who's who right there. Yeah. Just that in itself. Fascinating. I did not know the history of how you got here, but you've been here for, much of your life now.
51 years now.
Yeah. Let's go back to your childhood, because I think that helped shape who you are. And, your father being from what I understand, an accountant.
Yeah.
But your entrepreneur spirit, what did that?
My father resisted going into business for himself. And so I think I became the opposite of that. And I don't know where I really got the ideas from, but when I was 8 years old, we lived near a golf course. And my brother and I would find golf balls, and we would clean them up and sell them to new owners for 10 cents each. And we made money doing that. And my mom worked in the cartoon business, so we had a lot of cartoons and a projector. So we would darken a friend's garage, and we would invite the neighborhood, and we would show cartoons and sell, candy and soda and things like that. And then in 8th grade, my dad said, a lot of your friends who worked this summer had money taken out of their paycheck, and they have to fill out this form. It was a half-page form to get a refund. And so he taught me how to do it for myself. And I decided to go into business and do it for all my friends. I charged them $5 each to fill out this 5 puka form. And they all got like $100 to $200 back on their taxes, and they loved it. By 10th grade, I became a window washer. I had my own business through a college doing window washing, and I earned enough money for, my basic, spending and, personal expenses while I was going to San Diego State for undergrad and then UH for grad school.
So you were a small business owner before you were even out of high school.
I've never even really had a 9-to-5 job.
But you worked for yourself.
I've worked for myself. And when I was doing my window washing, I realized I was making 4 times per hour more than my friends were. And I was only working 1/4 as much as they were. So I figured I had a 16-fold advantage over them just by being in business for myself. And so that was my winning formula. When I graduated from UH, I opened up an office as a counselor in Kailua. I got invited to join a business consulting firm because of that background in 1978. And by 1980, I realized I was having more fun as a business consultant, and I did that for the next 40 years.
Wow. Well, when I look back at just reading some of your history, the decisions you made as a young man, in some ways, boy, I mean, you were a young child in that respect, but that mind was always working about small business and turned into a life for you. Math, obviously a strength.
That was the first subject I discovered I had any talent in. In third grade, I got put into an advanced math group of 8 students in my class, and I was shocked because these were all the bright kids, and I was never in their group, and they looked at me like, who the heck is this kid? But the teacher showed us long division, and I got it really quickly. And from then I had confidence in math, and then I had confidence in academics.
So you went on to college and became a psychology major.
I have a master's in psychology, so I was a counselor in Kailua, helped families and people whose marriages weren't, doing too well, and kids who were acting out, and just general relationship training,
like
stuff.
A therapist, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden, things changed. How'd you get into the small business world? I remember you back at HPU, but before that, I mean, what exposed you to the world of education?
Well, I joined Small Business Hawaii, and a couple years later, they put me on their board of directors. And then a couple years after that, they asked me to be the facilitator of their annual meeting at the Ala Moana Hotel. And I looked out on the group, and there were all these old fogies in the audience. And I came back to the board, and I said, there are a lot of people who are like me, were a young entrepreneur. How come they're not in our organization? So we created a board of director, a new director for the board who was a young entrepreneur under 35. We cut our rate in half for people under 35. We created a newsletter for people in that group. And the first project they put on was an all-day training on entrepreneurship at KCC. I put on 2 classes on marketing at that class, and somebody from HPU was there who co-sponsored the all-day training program. And she said, Lola Lackey, why aren't you teaching at HPU? And I said, I don't know. And so she said, I've got a great class. I think it would be perfect for you. And so I did 15 years of teaching that class at HPU.
Wow, Bob, that's amazing. So you're a psychology major. You've had this business background all your life, and now you're doing marketing and educating, college students. Which now I see the path of how you got to, educating students. But the journalism element. I mean, were you a journalist at all?
No, not at all. I gave my students an assignment at HPU to go to 2 networking meetings and meet 6 business owners, and then get one to give them a tour of their business. And I remember that first semester, one student interviewed somebody from Bank of Hawaii and found out it was created by upset customers of First Hawaiian Bank who were ticked off that a check of theirs, this is Castle and Cook, had been bounced in the 1880s. And when the recession was over in the sugar industry, they marched into the bank with a wheelbarrow, took all their money out in gold coins, had a parade up and down the streets of downtown Honolulu, and finally stopped a block and a half away and founded Bank of Hawaii, 1897. And I banked at Bank of Hawaii, and I never heard that story. And I thought, why is that? And then another student interviewed somebody at Metal Gold and found out that it was originally the name of Continental Creamery's butter. And they had an employee contest to name it, and the winning answer was Metal Gold. And I thought, I've grown up with Metal Gold. How come I've never heard that story? And it dawned on me almost every Hawaii company had a great story that was largely unknown to the general public. And I typed up, some of these things the kids had found in the previous semesters to hand out to the current semester, and I had a few extra. Gave them out to my friends who were just wild and enthusiastic about it. and suggested I write a book. And so in 2003, that came together in a book, which was Companies We Keep. And as soon as I did that, people came up to me and said, oh, I've got a great story you missed. And they would tell me that. So that led to book 2 and then 3. I've got 5 at the moment. When 3 came out, the Star Advertiser said, how'd you like to write a regular column? And I said, I've never taken a class in journalism. I never took a class in business also in college, although I took a lot of private business classes. So, I like everything else I've done in my life, I've just kind of made it up.
And Rearview Mirror was the name of the column and still is today.
David Butts came up with that name, a name that I had thought of was already being used by somebody else, I think back in the day, which they used for photos. And David Butts was the business editor, and he said, how about Rearview Mirror? And so that was 13 years ago, and I've written 670 columns.
Unbelievable, Bob. And some of those inspired by even the companies we keep, if you will, right? I mean, was that the origin or the source of thinking of that this is something that resonates with community?
Yeah, I had actually walked into the business offices at the newspaper to ask them to write a story about my 3rd book. And they had written about book 1 and 2, so they said, sure. And when they invited me to do a regular feature, I was thinking, I could just take material out of my first 3 books and re-edit it for the newspaper. And I figured I'd had 2 or 3 years of material there. And I wasn't sure what I would do after that, but that list of stories that I could get into keeps getting longer, not shorter. It is amazing to me how these tiny little islands in the middle of a vast Pacific have so many great stories about the people and places and, schools and churches and military bases that we've had here.
It's kind of what this program is about, what school you went. I mean, it's not about what school did you attend, but that's how we connect with folks, right? Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, like I just asked you what school you went, and you knew exactly I was asking about your high school. Mm-hmm. The word of mouth, the Coconut Wireless, all of those things really are the oral side of who we are. But the storytelling is so very real because we have we have a rich history here. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about you, Bob, is that you're like a sponge. I can talk to you about any subject matter, and you'll have something in the back of your head that says, "Oh, did you know this? Cartwright Field," or the list goes on because the history is so vast and deep. That's part of that is being a historian. Where did that come from?
I think that I'm easily bored, but also easily stimulated. And, I look for things that interest me and wow me. And so I discovered at some point that the only things I want to write about are things that just blow my mind, things that I find fascinating, and I think having an outsider perspective on Hawaii is useful for that. I can stand back and see it in ways that sometimes locals can't. So I think, I've found that I have a talent for finding the high point of the story, for finding the elements of something that will wow someone. So when I'm writing my column, I'm looking for elements that will wow them, that will, make them think, I grew up here and I never knew that. Like I will talk to people like Diana, who's your assistant, who walked me in here. She lives in Pearl City, and I asked her, do you know how the name Pearl City was developed? And she didn't know. She's only been in Hawaii 3 years, so I wouldn't expect her to. But even people who grew up in Pearl City may not know that it was the railway, the Dillingham Railway, Oahu Rail and Land Company, that had a contest in 1890 to come up with a name for their stop for the train, and the name was Pearl City.
See, these are the gems that you have in that brain of yours.
And I think I'm fortunate to have my mother's good memory. My mother had a great memory.
Yeah.
She lived to be 97 years old. We got her to write a book about her years in the cartoon business in Hollywood when she was 80 years old. I don't think I have half the memory that she has, but it's pretty good. So if people tell me they went to Farrington High School, for instance, I might ask them if they knew the 3 locations that Farrington considered moving to before it was built in 1939. A lot of people who went to Farrington have no idea that there were 3 other possible locations. So, I like to keep those things,
Okay,
handy.
you got me. What are the 3 locations?
Well, one was where the insane asylum was on Lanakila and School Street. It's now like a Department of Housing, Lanakila, park area. But it used to be where the territorial Pupuli home was, they called it. It now moved to Kaneohe, but in the 30s, it was on the corner of Lanakila and School. And so that was one location because it had just moved out. Another was in the Kapalama area, which had been a swamp. And then the third was below where the school is today, kind of where Kalakaua Intermediate School is. And another interesting thing, since we're talking about Farrington, is that the original principal of the school wanted 3 different 10-acre lots to be able to be available for different subjects. One was athletics, one was academics. What was the third 10-acre area he wanted for the campus?
Politics.
Agriculture.
Ag. I was going to say ag. Doggone it. I was just thinking governors.
He wanted to be able to grow plants and trees and sell them to pay the state back for the money that the school cost them to build.
There's so much in my mind going crazy right now, Bob. When I back at KHON, when I was doing these location specials, if you will, how did Kailua become Kailua? How did the history of Kaka'ako? I reached out to you because I knew that you had all of these little gems that would be aha, wow moments. Even the simple things about the history of Ala Moana Center. You've got so much in your brain. Tell us a couple of little tidbits of Ala Moana Center that folks may not even know.
Well, it was the Dillinghams that built Ala Moana Center, and Louise Dillingham was driving down Ala Moana Boulevard one day when they were building it, and she got mad that the building of the shopping center was blocking her view of Diamond Head from Ala Moana Boulevard. And she complained, to the contractor, and the contractor said, "Complain to your husband, not me, lady. This is his project, not mine."
Yeah. I mean, that was back then, when many, many, many years ago, that was just swamp. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah.
It was. And it was filled in by Dillingham, who got the contract to dredge Ala Moana and build Ala Moana Beach Park. So the area offshore was dredged and the fill became Ala Moana Beach Park, but the extra fill filled in the swamp where Ala Moana Shopping Center was. Right. Now, one of the most interesting things about Ala Moana Shopping Center is that it needed an anchor tenant for their insurance company, Equitable, to give them the money to build the center. And they turned first to Marshall Field of Chicago. And Marshall Field and the Dillinghams were friends. They had come out here for 10 years, the families, and gotten together, and they planned to be the anchor tenant. They came to Hawaii to sign the papers, and the day before backed out. And we don't know why. We have a few ideas, but we don't know why they said no to Ala Moana Shopping Center, which then scrambled. They went to Macy's, who said no. They went to Liberty House, who said no because it was happy downtown. Went to a couple other places. Finally, they convinced Sears, who was only a mile or two away on Baratania Street. And they agreed to do it as long as their building would not be sold to another retailer and would compete with them. And they got almost a no-rent deal for the first dozen years or so. They
were the first anchor, if you will. Yeah.
But they were the fourth choice.
Right. Amazing. Did not know that. How do you remember all this? I mean, who first of all, who educated you about these little gems?
A lot of it came from my students in the first book, and then, I started doing some research. But if you hear a good joke today, I often tell people, and tomorrow you think about it, you probably won't remember the joke. But if you tell somebody today, you probably will remember it tomorrow. Mm. So I think it's that repetition that really works. So in my case, I write it, or research it. I edit, and then I go to groups and I speak it. So all that repetition is one of the reasons I think I remember some of these things. But I have to keep my own books handy to research things because sometimes I know I wrote it, but I can't bring it up in my, imagination.
Like I could just say a word or a location or a person, and you'd have a story behind it.
Well,
let's try. Random. Aku.
Aku. Well, Aku came to Hawaii. He was a violinist. He played on the band on the ship that came here. He worked at a whole lot of radio stations before he finally found his niche. He went bankrupt even though he was the highest paid DJ in America because he loved to gamble. He golfed a lot at Waialae Country Club, and he gambled quite a bit. He wanted his ashes buried on the golf course when he passed away at Waialae. And the joke over there at Waialae is that they scattered his ashes on the golf course, but they blew into the sand traps. My friend Jed Gaines remembers playing golf with him at Waialae, and he says he found himself in the sand trap, and it took him like 10 swings to get out of the sand trap. So a lot of people think that's fitting.
That's funny.
Aku also did all kinds of stunts, and one was to golf from KGMB on, near Keamoku Street and Kapiolani all the way to Waialae, a putter and a golf ball. And I think he broke 14 putters on the way there.
On the ground?
Yes, hitting the ball, on the roadway and sidewalks of Honolulu.
Yeah, that's the old K-59 CSEFTEL relationships as well. Let me give you another one. Let me just I'm going to totally randomly say it. Diamond Head. Anything on Diamond Head?
Diamond Head, there's a lot that I think of when I think about it, but one of the thoughts that I have is that there were a lot of gun batteries. We had artillery there. It was part of the coastal defense system of Hawaii. Fort Ruger was the fort that was there. And one of the guys who lived in the Diamond Head area near Black Point was a code breaker at Pearl Harbor. Jasper Holmes was his name. Holmes Hall at UH is named for him. And he picked up and deciphered some Japanese radio communications that indicated soon after Pearl Harbor was attacked that there was a Japanese sub off of Kahala. And he told the military about that. They decided to turn their gun batteries at it. And the problem was houses were visible in their sights. And they said, we really can't shoot it, where you're pointing us because, we're liable to blow a house up, not a submarine. Jasper Holmes had called his wife and said, get the kids in the car and get out of there quickly. Why? I can't tell you. Well, I'll get to it soon, honey. We're busy right now. We're doing something. Do it now. Why? I can't tell you. But fortunately, the Battle of Diamond Head never really happened, and whatever submarine we thought was out there was left alone because Jasper Holmes's house may have been blown up by the gun battery that was trained on the submarine that was offshore. And there were Japanese submarines in our waters for the first 6 weeks of World War II.
What's your, Bob, I'm just fascinated. What's your favorite, I don't even know if this is even something that you can answer. What's your favorite trivia that you've learned or your most, like you say, you like to surprise people with your information that you have. What's something that just sticks out in your mind through the years?
You know where Fort Armstrong was?
Yes.
And now the Pier 1 and 2. It was named for Samuel C. Armstrong, who was born in Wailuku. His father was the kahu at Kauaihau Church and also the top guy at the Department of Education in Hawaii. And he joined the Civil War as a captain, commanded an all-black regiment, was promoted several times, and attended the ceasefire and the surrender ceremonies at Appomattox Courthouse as a brigadier general. After the Civil War was over, he decided that black people who had been newly freed from slavery needed an education to be able to compete in the world. And so he founded the Hampton Institute in Virginia. One of his students was Booker T. Washington, and he sent him to take the model for the school at Hampton to Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and he took over the school there, and it became one of the top schools in the South. And the model that he used was Hilo Boarding School's model, which was a largely vocational and teacher training school. So that school was founded in Hilo in 1832 and is the grandparent of the Hampton Institute, the Tuskegee Institute, and then one more school in Hawaii whose name is...
I don't know.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Kamehameha. That's
The original model for Kamehameha's program was the Hilo boarding school, which was originally a feeder school for Lahaina Luna, the oldest
Right.
school west of the Rocky Mountains. And Kamehameha was its model was the Hilo boarding school, teacher training and job training.
wow. I did not know that. And Cavett, by the way, is a Kamehameha young man as well, graduate. Bob, I every time I talk to you, I'm always like, my mouth is wide open because it just, for just what I can only imagine your brain going 100 miles an hour because you have so much of this rich knowledge. But I want to continue this conversation because I think what I learned through the years, and I sat in on one of your HPU classes. I don't know if you remember that. And while you were able to, take what the students did as a project or your class project and then turn this into a whole world, it fascinates me. And every time I every time I read another rearview mirror, I'm like going, okay, that's brilliant. Where'd that come from? I want to dive into that. Okay, can you come back?
I'd be happy to.
Bob Sigall. Bob, thank you so much. We'll talk to you in a bit. The companies we keep. When's the next one coming out?
I'm not sure if there will be, but I am very excited about a particular topic. I'll tell you more about that if you want. And that could be a 6th book, but I don't know if that'll take that form. Maybe it'll be TikTok videos this time.
Right. It's a whole new world out there. By the way, I thank you for including me in one of your companies we keep. It's cool.
Yeah, I've got your picture.
Yeah.
And I've got a quiz in the book called Who Dat? And I've got high school yearbook photos of you and about 30 other people that some of them look like they did in high school and some of them are pretty far away.
Yeah, but that's probably about 60, 70 pounds ago with a lot more hair. All right, Bob, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back real soon. Mahalo nui for joining us, folks. Join us next week. Another episode of What School You Went. Until then, ahui ho.
What School You Went is a PBS Hawaii production. Music by Taimane Gardner. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and tell your friends. You can find us on pbshawaii.org and everywhere you get your podcasts.